Hi, HR Nation. It's Chris Rainey. Welcome to the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR practitioners 5 days a week. Today, we have a special guest on the show. We're joined by Brenda, Bence, who's a professional speaker, executive coach, and award-winning author. Brenda, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Chris. I'm great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Fantastic. We was getting so excited in the conversation before we hit record that I forgot we was even not recording. So really excited to share your insights and get to know you a bit more with our listeners. Before we jump in, Brenda, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself personally and your journey to where we are today.
Sure. Well, Chris, my background, I started actually in branding companies, big corporations, large multi-billion-dollar businesses where I actually led billion-dollar brands myself. So I was a senior leader. And interestingly, same as senior leaders all around the world, multiple continents, hundreds of people reporting to me. And what I learned from that a lot, but I also learned that the old adage of it's lonely at the top is true.
Yeah,
it's true. At that level, you can't turn to a boss, you can't turn to peers, you can't turn to direct reports, you can't turn to your family. So, everyone has filters and everyone sees it differently. So when I left the big corporate world after 20 years, I decided to start my own business. And it took my two passions, leadership and branding, and combined them. And I wanted to help leaders, A, get over this, it's lonely at the top, and B, build inspiring leadership brands. So brands for themselves. How do they become, again, my passions of leadership and branding and for companies and for individuals. And so I do that today through executive coaching and keynote speaking. And I have, as I mentioned earlier, I travel all around the world to do this. I'm truly global and I love every minute of it, and have also lived outside of my native US for, 20 some years as well. I laughingly say I used to hire people like me.
That's true though, right? Well, first and foremost, I'm really excited to have on the show because the work that you're doing right now couldn't be more relevant, especially in the age of social media that we live in right now, where it's very important that everyone builds a personal brand, especially leaders in organizations. It's something that I'm personally working on. Even as a startup, I understand how important that is as CEO of the business to build my brand. It allows our audience, our customers, our investors to know, like, and trust us. Yes. It's what we do, right? It's very important. And you can't hide anymore. You've got things like Glassdoor. You've got all of these different platforms out there that it's very important that we do that. So yeah. I'm really excited for you because you couldn't be in a better space as well. Yeah. Just out of interest, I wasn't planning on asking this question, but many of the HR executives and the CHROs that I work with, loads of them are thinking about doing something similar. They always tell me offline, they say, Chris, I'm really thinking about leaving and starting my company. And then they never pull the trigger. What advice would you give to anyone, like any of the executives that are listening right now that I know there's so many, I can even name them in my head that are thinking about going out on their own? What advice, looking back, what advice would you give them?
I think it's a combination of the three brains that we have, right? Because we know we have three centers of nucleus in our body that help us make decisions. We have our head brain, which is between our ears, which helps us through thinking. Mm-hmm. We have our heart brain, which helps us through the feeling. And we have our gut brain, which helps us through that sense of knowing. And I think when all three of those are in sync, when all three of them can say, you know what, this is the right thing to do. Now, you won't know it's the right thing, I think, until you have a vision. And it doesn't even have to be a right vision, but you have to have something that says, that's inspiring to me. I said earlier, it's not about what you're running away from. It's about what you're running toward. That's far more important. If you feel so strongly about what you're running toward, and you can see it, feel it, touch it, taste it, that's a calling. And you do it, and you will do it. You do whatever it takes to make it happen. And you'll live, even though you're working 24 hours a day, you will love every minute of it because you're doing what you love.
It's always interesting. We think we can have a whole other show about this. So let's move on. So I love the topic of today. So today, guys, we were talking about, would you want to work for you? Mm-hmm. And since you sent me this over, Brenda, I've been sitting there thinking to myself, asking myself that question over the last few weeks, thinking, would I actually want to work for Chris? It's actually opened up my own mind, and I'm not going to reveal them now, but I've actually changed a few things in the way I'm actually managing the team just by sitting there for a second and reflecting for a moment on exactly how I'm managing the team and going, would I want to work for me? And there were some obvious little improvements that I could make immediately, and I didn't even plan to. It was just by asking myself the question and just taking a moment to that I've just recently made a few changes in the one-on-ones that I'm having with the team, and yeah, so just
that's great. That's great.
Didn't expect to do so. What does that really mean to you, then? What's the inspiration behind that question?
So I come from branding world. So I
Yeah.
always kind of have branding analogies. And one day I was reading an article, and I thought this was such a fascinating article. It was talking about the coffee industry. And it said when the beans are in its actual raw bean state, it's worth about 3 to 5 cents per cup. When you grind up those beans and you put it on a store shelf with the brand name, it's worth about 10 to 50 cents per cup. You walk down the street and you get a coffee served with a smile, theoretically at a Dunkin' Donuts, wherever, it's worth $1 to $2 a cup. And then there's Starbucks. And we around the world pay anywhere from $4 to $9
It's
US dollars.
crazy when you put it that way.
It's insane. But why do we do that?
Because of the brand.
Why do we do that? We're paying for the experience. It's the chance to take a break in the middle of the day to enjoy your favorite, I never can get it right, chakalaka, mocha, froca.
They're making up new ones every day now.
Right? It's to watch the barista, the theater of coffee making, and it's the experience. And so it brought me to the thought of people will pay more for a greater experience. And it got me to thinking, what is the experience of working for or with you? Honestly, would you want to be your colleague? Would you want to be your boss? Would you want to be your subordinate? Would you want to work for you? It can be a very sobering question, but as you said, kind of an action-oriented question too. Really think about the experience. And I have seen this one question turn around certain coaches' careers. I mean, it's literally switch it around. Because if you want to get promoted, you want to make more money, you want to move up a ladder, I'm telling you, improve the experience of working with you. And people will overlook challenges that you have or things you don't do well if they enjoy the experience of working with you. So don't underestimate how important that is.
I think it's so important. And when I first became a manager, I had no training whatsoever. I was just thrown in the deep. Oh, Chris, you're a great salesperson. You'll be a good manager. Because a lot of companies just promote people based on their success as opposed to do they actually have the management skills to do the role, right? My entire plan of how I was managing my team was just basically not manage my team how I was managed, because I hated the way I was managed. So I was like, my entire plan was I want them to enjoy the experience of me managing them because I had such a bad experience.
You're a bit of an exception. A lot of people follow the leaders that they've had. That's how they learn leadership from
I've heard that. Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's not always the right way to go. As you said, you didn't feel you had a great first leader. I always say, be the leader you wish you had. Because here's the truth. We all know what good leadership is. Chris, I could ask you right now off the top of your tongue to say the top 20 characteristics of a great leader. You could do it. We can all do it. The challenge is embodying it. People complain to me, oh, I don't have great leaders. I don't know. It's not my fault I'm not a good leader because I don't have. That's not true. We know that's not true.
Yeah. Well, on that point then, why is it so important for leaders to become the type of boss that others want to work for?
Well, I think, Chris, today more than ever, and I know with this audience, they will probably be shaking their heads. Yes, it's hard to find good help. I think that's never been truer than today. I mean, we have such a shortage of talent happening all around the world. So when you do find great people to work for you, you do not want to lose them. And there's all sorts of polls out there about what is the number one thing that employees want in a job. And you probably know what it is. Yeah. A good boss. It's a good boss. So the number one reason for losing good people is that they don't have a good boss. So, and this is impacting billions of dollars every year. People are losing, it's amazing. I've actually even worked at very, very senior levels, COOs, CFOs, publicly listed companies who run, have 85,000 people reporting to them, and they run multiple continents and thousands of people and so much money. And they walk in my office miserable. Oh no, I love my job. I love my job. I don't like my boss.
Yeah.
It's just astounding, right? And people will leave because they don't like their boss. So it's costing companies, it's millions and billions of dollars every year. And this is more true than ever now, Chris, because members of Generation Y, they won't put up with a bad boss. In fact, the number one motivator that came through in a United Nations report about Generation Y said the number one motivator, well, almost all except one country, and I'll explain in a second, said, I want a positive relationship with my boss was the most important attribute, a motivator that they could come up with. And this was across 60 different countries. So Think about that. This Gen Y has much lower tolerance for bad bosses. They will just go work for somebody else.
Yeah.
Because again, there's such a talent shortage.
I've left 2 companies in the past for that exact reason, where I've actually really enjoyed the product we sold, the team I loved, but I've left because of the leadership. Well, on that point then, because obviously it leads on to branding, your expertise is in leadership branding, right? So
Yes.
what does that mean?
Yes.
Because we hear it thrown around a lot right now. And what makes it important for the success of leadership in today's sort of new world of work that we operate in?
So I like to define leadership branding as the way you want people to perceive, think, and feel about you in relation to other leaders. Perceive, think, and feel. And this is extremely important. Perception in branding is reality, Chris. So how you are perceived is your brand, whether you like it or not. And, people do think about you, but they also feel. There's a feeling towards you. So being able to not control, but to be able to influence how people perceive, think, and feel about you is building your brand. And a lot of people say to me, oh, Brenda, I am really not into self-promotion. I don't want nor have a brand. I don't want a brand. I don't have a brand. But of course, they already do. You already do.
Whether they like it or not. Yeah, exactly.
Just by virtue of being you in the workplace, you have a brand. So the question I always ask is, what is your brand now? I like to use a 5-word exercise. What are the first 5 words that come to mind when you think of Chris Rainey? X, X, Y, Z, A, B, C, whatever the words are. And just ask a lot of people that. That's how you start to understand your brand as a leader.
Yeah. And I see more and more now that the most successful leaders, again, in the HR space, have consciously built a strong brand. And
I think you have to today.
Yeah, honestly, it's essential, right? And Pat Wardor's former CHRO of LinkedIn, and now Chief Talent Officer over at ServiceNow and Chief Learning Officer as well. She would host their annual conference every single year and be the face of their brand, right? And if you thought about getting a job at LinkedIn, you knew Pat. You had seen 20 videos of her on stage talking about their culture and, their why and their purpose of LinkedIn. You already knew it. You didn't have to think about, do I want to work at LinkedIn? What you knew Pat, and I knew Pat. So I actually, I really wanted to work at LinkedIn at one point in my early career. I love this company. And I would follow Pat online. I'd watch her keynotes. I'd listen to her on podcasts, right? She was just HR director, right? Just in the organization. And she told me, Jeff, the CEO, came to her one day and said, look, I'm looking for a people leader that we can build a brand around. And she told me she was terrified. She was like, Chris, because I had her on the podcast. She was like, I was terrified. Chris, like, who am I to go on stage and lead, these big, huge keynotes and conferences? Like, I've never even done any of that before. But she's like, since she's done that, it's really changed her life and her career and the opportunities that she's gained by exposing herself, new job opportunities that come up, for example, at ServiceNow, right? It's based on her brand as well as her experience and her insights as well.
And people are, yes, they're attracted to a company, but they're more today. What I'm learning is they're more attracted to a purpose.
Yes.
Higher purpose. Is there a purpose to this organization? Is there a purpose and a vision of this leader? So that brand is a part of that. And I think that's, again, why it's so critical today.
So what are some of the other pushbacks you get on building a brand of some of the leaders that you speak to?
Well, there's a perception that branding means I must be on social media. Yes. And actually, I would actually say that's not the case. It is for some, that's fine. Definitely for some of the larger companies, they want to attract talent, all that. But I'm talking about the brand you also have in your workplace as you walk around the office, what people will perceive, think, and feel about you, whether you're in the room or not. That's what I'm talking about too. So it's both in person, the actual day-to-day brand, but also if for some people, the brand that is existing in a more public arena.
Yeah, it's why I always hear from the successful HR leaders that I say, what's some advice you give to sort of junior? They get out of your office. Just get out of your office, be there. You should never be in your office ever. You should be out in the workplace, in different facilities, traveling around, like engaging people, and that's part of that brand.
It's a connection. We want connection more than ever. It's ironic. We do the texting. What's that all about? We want connection. So connection in person, especially since we're doing so much flex time work these days and people aren't actually seeing each other as much as they used to. People crave connection.
So in your book, you talk about the leadership threshold.
Yes.
First of all, what is that? And why is it so critical to achieving success at high levels of leadership?
Chris, what I started to notice when I was working with a number of leaders, dozens of leaders on it, I kept seeing the same challenges over and over and over again. And what happens is that they reach what I call the leadership threshold at a certain point in their career. And if you can imagine a visual of a platform, a very flat platform, and let's call that platform the leadership threshold. To your left, below, there's a staircase going up to that platform. And that's what I call below the leadership threshold. You come across that platform to the right, and you have a staircase heading up out of this,
Mm-hmm.
up out of that platform. What I found was that people that were performing at this lower level staircase, if you would, had a certain set of beliefs and behaviors that were really holding them back. They thought they were serving them because at one point in time they were. They were definitely serving them. But there was these thoughts and beliefs and behaviors, and they couldn't figure out why they could never break through that leadership threshold and make it to the next ladder, which was taking them to higher levels of leadership. To juxtapose the differences in these beliefs and behaviors that were at these two different levels, and really helping leaders get past that being stuck. They just hadn't realized the different mindsets and behaviors that were critical to the success, to the rules of engagement. The game had changed.
When you meet with these leaders, what's normally the first type of sort of tactical thing that you go through with them?
Well, the very first thing you need to do is do some deep dive self-awareness. That's the number one thing. You know, we often don't take enough time to stop and
yeah,
about ourselves. We're so, we're busy. We've got businesses to run and we've got lots of people to be involved. We've got families to deal with. So they don't take time to actually think about themselves and to pause and say, what am I really good at? What am I not so good at? What could I improve upon? Am I focusing on business, people and business at the same ratio? Am I focusing on what are my behaviors that may be working for me and may be working against me? So just really diving deep into some good self-awareness. And that's done, of course, through self-assessments and good deep discussions. I have a program I call Leadership Lifeline. I help them think about how they became the leader they are today, and et cetera. So there's a real deep dive early on to get into that self-awareness stage.
There are a series of ratios you discuss, you say are key to winning, at senior levels of leadership. Could you go into those? What are the most sort of critical ones?
So what I like to do, Chris, is draw a circle. Literally ask the leader to say, okay, what if this was a pie graph of your time and you had to split it between percentage of time that you spend every week building business versus building people, what would that ratio really look like?
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I need to do that myself now after this call. Very interesting. Yeah.
And often way more on business than people.
I already in my head, I was like 80-20, if that. Yeah.
And I can tell you, here's the truth. The business will build by building people.
Yeah.
At the higher levels of organizations in particular, when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of people, you are just one person. As much as CEOs don't like to hear that, it's true. You're just one person, CFOs, COOs, you're just one person. The business is going to be built through building people. And that shift in mindset is often enough right there just to get people thinking, okay. And then I'll say, well, what ratio would you like it to be? Let's say that it's 80-20, like you said, Chris. What ratio would you like it to be? Well, it probably should be the other way around. Okay, so that's our goal. So now we're going to work slowly. We're going to get to that place. What would it take for us to get there? So this is the kind of, that's one key ratio, obviously, business versus people. So that's one, building business versus building people. I have a lot of these ratios that I ask people to look at, depending upon the individual and what's happening for him or her. But tasks versus relationships is another one. And I don't mean building business. I mean just project lists to do what I've got to get done today versus truly building relationships. I mean relationships where I remember one gentleman I was coaching, I said how I was sharing some ratios and we got to tasks versus relationships. And he said, oh, this one I'm really good at. I said, oh, that's fantastic. So do the circle. I said, tell me the percentage. And he said, oh, I'm sure I'm doing really great. I said, okay, well, tell me the person that you probably work the most with in your organization. He said, honestly, it's probably my right arm, which is my assistant. I said, great. I said, tell me her name. Oh, he told me her name. And I said, what do you know about her? And he said, well, she's married. I said, well, that's fantastic. I said, that's great. And he said, I went to her wedding. I said, that's even better. That's terrific. What a nice statement. I said, what's her husband's name? And look, I'm not judging. It's just one of those points, right? Where you say, oh my gosh, probably the most important person in her life is her husband. And these are the things I'm talking about. It's about getting to know them at a little bit deeper level. What do they like to do for holidays? Where do they have pets? I mean, whatever it is, people want to have a connection, and that connection is going to come from focusing on relationships, not just tasks. Yeah. Yeah.
And to reflect your point, again, doing over 150 interviews with HR executives, they always point out as one of the key things that made them successful is building those relationships with those key leaders in the business. So when it comes time to maybe go for a transformational change, they have such meaningful relationships with these people that they can get there a lot quicker, and they understand what motivates each of them individually. And there's no easy way to do that. Again, the only way to do that is to spend the time, you know, whether it's one-on-ones. And I've had leaders tell me, Chris, I spent the last year traveling across the world just to build relationships. That's it.
Right.
I've invested the entire year, nothing else. I've just joined a company. I've not looked at anything tactical, anything. All I've done for a whole year is travel around the world, build relationships with all of these different leaders, some of these different business units. And then I'm going to roll out the new strategy and based around what I've heard. I was like, wow, okay.
Well, and it drives another ratio that I think is incredibly important, which we often don't think about, which is, are you more respected or liked? And this is really powerful as well. And again, I asked them to draw a circle and what do they think? It honestly doesn't really matter what they think, because what matters is what the stakeholders think. And I will ask the stakeholders that exact same question and then share the outcomes. But, you know, if you're more liked than respected, oh gosh, you know, you can tell a lot of jokes at work and everyone, you know, you have a lot of fun hanging out together or whatever, but you may get passed over for promotions. You may not be taken seriously when it comes to strategy, whatever. On the other hand, if you're more respected than liked, yeah, you know, you head towards the water cooler and everyone dissipates. Everyone goes back to work, or, you know, someone's telling a joke and you step in and everyone leaves. You know, you've got to be careful. You'll have a higher rate of turnover. So you've got to find that balance. And what you're talking about, traveling around, connecting with people, that's how you build those like levels and the relationships. And they are so important today, again, because people want to work for someone they like. Every day I always say, come to the office, draw a circle. If you're at 80-20 today and you want to be at 20-80 eventually, okay, don't try for 20-80 right now. It's not going to happen. Try for 75-25. Okay? 75-25. And then a couple of weeks, you'll try for 60-40. And you just slowly keep working that circle. Draw a circle every day as you walk into a meeting. Say, okay, I'm going to listen. What percentage of the time during this meeting? I'm going to ask questions instead of tell. How am I going, you know, what percentage of the time? And it's just constantly, it's a great self-monitoring and very simple. Like you said, I believe in simplicity. We change when it's simple. If it's complicated, we won't change.
If you had to pick one single, the most important leadership skill to develop, what would you say that is?
I think that's listening. I tell you, listen. I remember there was a gentleman, he led 60,000 people and he was retiring, and they asked him, he was a former CEO of a very large organization. And they said to him, what is the single most important thing you learned as a leader? And he said, it's the ability to listen. And you know, it's funny, Chris, you think that listening would come so naturally to us, right? But it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. We often mistake it for hearing. See, hearing is the act of perceiving sound. Mm-hmm. We're born with it. Listening is the act of paying attention with our ear, and we have to learn to do that. As children, we did it. We had to, because that's how we learned life. We listened. But as we get older, we kind of stop listening. And I find this particularly true at work. And so, and it's funny, there's some statistics of why it's so difficult, Chris. The average person speaks 125 to 175 words per minute, but we can listen at 450 words per minute. So we've got so much more coming in. At any point in time, we get distracted, especially in today's world where we've got the texting going on and we've got our earbuds in and all of this going on. You can see why we get distracted very easily, because how well are we really listening? Mm-hmm. So I think I always work with leaders to talk about how well are you listening, really listening, active listening.
It's very important, and it's in sales. It's a key skill, obviously, in sales to listen, right? And that was one of the things that I sort of realized I wasn't doing in the first few years as much as I was telling the customers how amazing our products were and how fantastic the features and the benefits were. And I was really enthusiastic about it. I was like, this is incredible. I was like, why am I not getting the traction and conversions that I think I should be? Right? I'm doing everything right.
It's so funny because you bring up another really important point, and that is, I was working with one leader as an example. She was very high level in a big professional services organization, and she was staying up all night long because she would study in advance of meeting clients, because she felt she needed to be the expert, always know all the answers to all the questions and be able to tell everything about the industry and the
exactly
question, whatever. We switched it around. She was literally staying up till 2 a.m. every night trying to learn as much as she could.
That's
we
crazy.
switched it around to asking questions. Ask questions. Great questions. That's all. And what ended up happening is within 9 months, she got a $6 million deal. And within another 9 months after that, she got another $15 million deal. So when you ask, and you listen, it shifts everything. And leaders need to do the same.
We always talk about inspiring others and in motivate, engaging others. How do you become a leader that inspires others?
Yeah, look, when it comes to inspiring, I think it's a few things. Number one, have a clear vision. And by the way, don't create it yourself. Leaders always want, okay, I'm going to step in, I'm going to create a vision, I'm going to tell people what my vision is. Well, that's not inspiring. That's push. So get people engaged in building a vision with you. And I don't mean a vision of what the numbers are going to look like or how many, what's the revenue. I mean, what's the feel of this place? What's it like to say I work at this organization? Or what is it like when you walk in? When you walk in the door in the morning in our vision, what does it feel like, taste like, look like? What do you want that? So to really become a visionary, but with your team. And then everyone's pointed to the top of the mountain. Take them to the top of the mountain. Let them see what it's going to be like when we get there. Because people want to be inspired towards something. Again, not running away from something. It's more like we want to win. We're not here to compete so that others can lose. We want to win. And so it's really about focusing on that. I think that's foundational in terms of inspiration. I also think that the other thing, again, is ask, build relationships, get all the things we've talked about. People are inspired by people they like. And also, last I would say, have a sense of calm confidence. People want a leader who, in the middle of a storm, they know they've got someone they can rely on. They know someone's got their back. That calm confidence is foundational to leadership. So I always think, work on those, get a vision, think about how you're being, not just what you're doing. That sense of calm confidence. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of inspiration, that feeling that, when you're around people.
Yeah. Well, look, Brenda, I've really enjoyed this conversation so much, and I'm sure everyone else has listening as well. I think everyone scribbled down loads of notes like I have of things that we need to go and do So very, very much actionable advice, and really excited by it. How can our listeners, or one, where can they grab a copy of the book, and also where can they learn more about you, and if they want to work with you, get hold of you, where's the best place to find out?
Sure. So today we were talking about the book, Would You Want to Work for You? All my books are on Amazon.com, so you can always find them there. Or you can visit my website, just my name, BrendaBence.com. And I have a book section there too. And you can also, if interested in talking to me about coaching or keynoting, whatever. Also on LinkedIn, all the social media, right? Professional page, LinkedIn, Facebook, LinkedIn. And
all of the ones.
All of the above. Install the above. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to connect. It'd be great.
Fantastic. And before we wrap up, there's that one parting piece of advice you give to everyone. What would that be?
There's many things we've talked about today. So I'll talk one we haven't talked about, which is understand what motivates others. There is a whole host of motivators, and we make assumptions about what motivates people. And the truth is, not everybody is motivated by the same thing. And until you understand, leadership is becoming very individual today. Everyone wants something that's for them, and that's how you keep people. So be the leader you wish you had. Ask people what motivates them. Is it title? Is it money? A lot of people think it is. It's obvious. Honestly, usually it's not. It's flex time. It's being connected to a higher purpose. It's being potentially affiliated with an important effort or important company. You have to ask, what really does motivate you? So I think that's key, because once you know what those motivators are, you've got people that are hooked. They're people that are, and you use that to engage that with them and leverage it. They're excited. They're ready. They want to come to work.
Fantastic. Well, Brenda, thanks so much for taking the time out to join us. Really enjoyed it.
Chris.
For everyone listening, as always, guys, if you head over to hrleaders.com, you'll find the show notes from this episode, the link to Brenda's website, to all of the books. They'll all be linked in the show notes to make life very easy. So you can click straight on there to grab a copy. Apart from that, Brenda, thank you so much again, and for your insights, and I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, it was great to connect. I appreciate it very much.